We're going to chat about the Leinster Senior Football semi-finals here now. Dublin against Laois and Meath against Kildare. Stephen, how impressed were you with Dublin against Westmeath last week, winning 22 points to 11?
Shane, nothing sort of surprises me with this Dublin team anymore. I came away from that game thinking to myself that I came into the game thinking Dublin could be quite vulnerable this year. They're coming in with a new manager, they're coming in with fresh faces. But I was actually driving home last night and I was thinking about this. One thing Jim Gavin done, Shane, was introduce new players. Nearly every year to keep guys. And I was thinking the reason behind this. There's Robbie McDade, who went in the other night, who had a really, really good game, really good impact. Owen Merkin had slipped in a corner back the other night. And you looked at their defence on paper and you thought, that's not the team that I would have known 2 or 3 years ago, and you would have, would that team scare you? Probably not. But yet they still produced that same methodical performance that they always produce, that the way they play to their game plan, Shane, and I would actually probably go as far as saying the flexibility that they have in the game plan is just phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And I think one of the biggest things, Shane, about it is that by bringing these lads in, there's a reason for it. There's a reason for it because nobody gets comfortable. Nobody gets comfortable. And I think even Dean Rock last year spent a period of time on the bench, during a couple of National League games.
I think Cormac Costello took over for him for a while.
Yeah, he did, because I think the word in the street was that Gavin wasn't happy at where his percentage of free kicks were at that stage, and it just keeps everybody on their toes. And, it's a wee bit like Alex Ferguson. He was brilliant at doing it at Man United. He never let anybody get comfortable. Even in 1995, gone back a long time ago, and I'm going off track a wee bit here maybe, but even when he got rid of Mark Hughes and Andre Kaczewskis and Paul Ince that one summer, everyone in United were going, what is he doing? He's mad, those lads. But he just seen them boys getting comfortable. And he just said, no, we're going to push on. We're going to go a different direction. And I think Gavin was excellent at doing that. He never let anybody get comfortable. And he wasn't afraid, Shane, to make hard calls. Brogan wasn't long getting chopped. Flynn wasn't long getting chopped. There was no sentiment. There was no sentiment, and there was no like, play him, sure, he's been a great servant. There's none of that. Fresh blood in. And by bringing this fresh blood in, these lads haven't really tasted. They might have been in panels, and they might have picked up a token gesture medal, but they haven't been in the starting team. And now that they're in, they want it, and they want to hold on to it. And that gives them a great drive and a great hunger. And I go back to that conversation I had with Johnny Cooper a number of years ago in Skerries in the Easter coaching camp. And he says to me, Stevie, everybody thinks that we're training in these high-tech science labs and these real fantastic facilities. He says our training facilities are just the normal. They're the same as everyone else's. What drives us, he says, is the competition within the panel. That if you're not doing it, someone else is going to do it for you. And that's the big thing, Shane. And that's what they have that a lot of other counties don't have. And they've got that real incessant desire and hunger to go after teams no matter who they are. And say the other night, it was just a little sort of message to say, look, yes, we're playing Westmeath, but you know what we're going to do? We're going to put our foot in your throat straight away, and we're going to keep it there. And the first 10 minutes just set the tone. Now, Westmeath were their own worst enemies as well, the way they set up. They set up very defensively, but then they didn't really have a plan outside of that. It was just get numbers back and hope that plugs holes. And against Dublin, what you have to do, Shane, is you have to manage the game. You have to try and take the sting out of the game. You have to control the game. You have to try and play it in your terms. And I felt at times Westmeath just played into their hands. Dublin got a score, goalkeepers racing to get another ball, set it up quickly, kick it back out, Dublin win again straight away. And it just plays into their hands. They want the game at high energy, high intensity. They want to go after your kick out straight away. And it's just, Leinster for me, Shane, at the minute is dead. It is dead, and it's unfortunate because I would even think the other two teams are just thinking to themselves, like Meath and Kildare are probably thinking, what's the point? Like Laois came back from a really good performance on Sunday past there against Longford to win by 2 points, and there was great celebrations at the end of the game, and I was chuckling to myself looking at them celebrating, saying, good luck, boys, because the juggernaut's coming on Sunday for you.
Well, we'll put it like this. Can you make a case for Laois? And like, if they're falling behind twice against Longford, once by 6 points, then by 5, and they probably would have been beaten only for Longford missed a couple of one-on-ones. Longford are obviously down in Division 3. It's very hard to make a case for them keeping the ball even kicked out to Dublin here.
No, I can see this, Shane. I can see this being a bigger scoreline than the Westmeath game. Westmeath beat Laois by 12 points or 11 points in the National League this year, and that's a big concern of mine. I think Laois were quite fortunate to stay up. I don't think they're a particularly good side. I think they were a better side 2 years ago under John Sugrue. I think they've regressed a little, and I think they were very fortunate to get a couple of results this year.
Is that because the likes of Donny Kingston isn't on the team anymore? He's opted out, and
Donny Kingston's not in the team anymore. I don't think Stephen Poacher's are. They've lost the keeper, Brody, as well. I don't know where he's disappeared to, but they were big players for them, and listen, Sugrue was a shrewd manager. He was a shrewd coach. He had them well set up. I don't know much about Mike Kirk. I'm not going to make a judgment on his managing, but I just think that they go into this game, Shane, naive enough to think that they can take Dublin on and have a go at them. I think it could be anything, and I feared a little bit for Westmeath on Saturday night because I felt watching the game, this could open up. But in fact, in the second half, actually, to be fair to Westmeath, they plugged away, Shane, they kept at it. But I think a lot of that was down to Dublin, just the job's done. Let's just keep the bodies right till next week. And I think a lot of that was that, But I said to you, Shane, on the show a number of weeks ago, this is just a ticking over exercise for Dublin. This is just to get Dublin up to speed, up to scratch, trial a few things. I would say there's probably a few things being trialled, even their system. They're trying Kilkenny in a different role. Kieran Kilkenny, for me, has probably been the player that's evolved the most over the last number of years from that sort of link player, that sideways passes. He was doing a chat show with me and Mark Poland up in the Savile Club last year. We had a good bit of crack with him, and I was giving him a bit of stick. I said to him, so all you do is get the ball and pass it 7 yards here, 7 yards there. I was calling the Ray Wilkins of Gaelic, sideways football, or Ray, Lord rest him, used to just kick the ball left and right, but he must have had 200 possessions a game. But he was laughing and joking, and they're two good lads. Him and Dean Rock were up at that, and Shane, this is the thing about them as well too, and I can only judge this on the likes of Kilkenny and Rock from the time I spent chatting to them, like real humble guys, really humble guys who aren't getting ahead of themselves, just go about their business. And he took a fair few slaps and a fair few hits the other night, but there's no retaliation, there's no petulance, there's none of that. I just don't see any weaknesses with them. I really don't, and it's just phenomenal at how I actually said to follow somebody, Kerry, I know they're out, but Kerry on their day are easier on the eye than Dublin. Dublin just are a little bit more systematic. Everything is very systematic, and everything is done to a real methodical nature. And it's just the system, the process. But you have to respect that. They're the best coach team I've ever seen.
Yeah, and they're so interchangeable. The other semi-final, actually, and one thing to add in, the fact that Laois are playing them at Croke Park rather than in Port or Mullingar or somewhere like that, I think only adds to their woes. Meath against Kildare, Meath beat Wicklow 7-14 to 7 points, an absolute beatdown. Whereas on the other side of things, Kildare beat Offaly by 20 points to 16. And you would have to say, if Kildare are only beaten, let's be respectful to Offaly, but they're not a top team. 20 points to 16, they should be putting up the sort of scoreline that maybe Meath put up against Wicklow. You'd have to nearly favour the Royals here.
Well, Offaly, Shane, Offaly are not a bad side. They're not a bad side. Last year I went to Navan to watch Offaly playing Meath live because Carlow were going to play the winner's strike 2 years ago and in the championship. And Offaly should have beat Meath that day. They were 6 points up in Navan. They had Meath beaten, and Meath came back and won the game by a point. Offaly, I probably just wouldn't be as dismissive of the result as a lot of Kildare. See, this is the problem with Kildare, Shane. Kildare people in general have a huge opinion of themselves as a county, and I think it's a little bit like here and down. They need to understand that they're not at the level of where they used to be at under the likes of McGeady 10 years ago. They're not at that level right now. They're rebuilding. They have a lot of young lads. They won an All-Ireland Under-21 championship with Davy Burke, who is now the Wicklow manager. So they have a lot of those young lads, bringing in all of those young lads. I suppose it's worth mentioning as well, Shane, it would probably be remiss of us not to mention it, that young Neil Flynn, who came on, who played with the day after burying his father, which I felt was the story of the weekend for me, Shane, to be honest with you. I thought it was a wonderful story, and testament to the lad that came out on the Sunday, and there was a picture of him on the field actually at the end of the game. I don't know if you've seen it on circulating on social media, so it would have been an emotional day for them, Shane, I think, as well, with that hanging over as well. So I just think coming in this weekend, I'm expecting a high scoring game. I'm expecting a very open game. Me and you have talked about Meath football. We've talked about how they're progressing, how unlucky they've been in Division 1. And Colin Nally coaching them, he's very innovative, he's very progressive, and I think they're going in the right direction. And to be honest with you, out of both teams, I would love to see Meath back in the Leinster final against Dublin, because I think Meath would have learned a lot more over the last couple of years than Kildare would have had, because Meath have been exposed to Dublin a couple of times rather than Kildare. And I think that if Kildare were to beat Meath at the weekend, I think that Kildare would be cannon fodder for Dublin in the final. But I really, really would love to see Meath get over this weekend, because I do feel, and I'm not suggesting anyway that Meath could catch Dublin, okay? But I do feel Meath would give Dublin a good game. I think they would give them a good game, and I think people would be very ignorant and very dismissive to not think that they could give them a good game.
Yeah, because I saw them at Parnell Park, I suppose it's 3 or 4 weeks ago at this point, and they only lost by 4 points to Dublin. And again, it comes back to what Laois are facing by going into Croke Park rather than playing them in a smaller venue. But I was quite impressed with them, and like Brian Menton coming through midfield, even watching Ronan Jones against Monaghan, his ability to run at defences. They do have a bit of pace, and they have some dangerous forwards like Shane Walsh and Thomas O'Reilly and, you know, Brian McMahon and the Wallaces. You know, they do have a lot of pace around the field. But is it ultimately going to be enough to bring them from losing by 18 points to 4, was it last year in the Leinster final, to, you know, fair enough, seeing off Kildare here, and obviously they have to play that match, but have they done enough to bridge the gap somewhat to make it a really competitive game?
Well, it's funny you mentioned the Leinster final. I was at it. I was actually at the game. I set up in the Hogan stand and I watched the game, and I really watched it from an analytical point of view. And I love going to watch county football. You know, different provinces, different styles, and you know, I went to that game with a friend of mine, and I said, and I spoke to Nally about this, spoke to Colin about this, and he agreed with me. He says, "Well, thank you," he says, "for saying that, because a lot of people wouldn't see that in that Leinster final, Shane. Meath did cause problems for Dublin in that first half. Now, Dublin had only registered 5 points at half time. They'd only registered 5 points, but the problem Meath had getting in at half time was they'd only registered 1 or 2 themselves. And that had really drained the confidence and lifeblood out of Meath at that stage, because they'd done so much right, Shane, but they had nothing to show for it in the scoreboard. And I think if they could just get that element right, you know, I think they'd be a lot closer. I don't think the scoreline was suggestive of the how the game had evolved, you know, particularly in the first half. But I think once Meath went in half time and had given as much as they'd given to their game plan and the way they set up. And Colin's very, very shrewd. Like he knows a lot about Dublin, and he sees a lot of things about Dublin that other teams wouldn't see. For example, the likes of Brian Fenton. Brian would play in the periphery of Dublin's system, right? But Brian's their out ball. He's their out ball that when they turn the ball over, they're looking for him straight away. He's nearly playing like a, what's the right word to say? Nearly cheating. You know, he's nearly playing on the edge. He's not come back in to do the donkey shift. They're using him, Shane, nearly in this sort of, if they're back here, he's nearly in this area here, just waiting for the ball to break down, and he's the link and he's the out ball, you know, for them to launch attacks in the opposition. And I just talked as well, Colin talked as well about their defensive shape, Shane, as well, about having this safety net, you know, in between their 2 lines. And the reason it works for them so well is that nobody gives them anything to think about up here. Whereas he said in the National League, Meath did get them turned 4 or 5 times. They did create 3 or 4 goal chances. Now, creating goal chances, Shane, against Dublin is unheard of. But to create 3 or 4 in the one game makes me think to myself, maybe Meath are going in the right direction, you know, as regards closing the gap in Leinster a little bit. But Shane, I'm not going to be controversial here and, you know, say something outside the norm, but I do think that the likes of Meath and Kildare need to look at themselves. You know, I think certain counties in Leinster really need to take a strong look at themselves and say to themselves, like, are you going to continue to let this gap get bigger and bigger and bigger? Because what can happen, Shane, is if you tell yourself something over and over and over again, you'll start to believe it. You know, you'll start to believe it. If you tell yourself that you're a really, really good player, you're a really good player, really good player, someone's telling you that all the time, you're going to start to believe it. You know, but and if you're listening to the narrative surrounding Dublin, they are unquestionably the greatest team we have seen, that I have ever seen, right? They are. But they're beatable. Every team's beatable. You know, they have to be beaten sooner or later. But if the media are consistently telling you this message, sometimes it can get into a team's psyche, Shane. It can, like Leinster, like most counties in Leinster have just thrown the towel in. You know, what's the point in the Leinster Championship? Well, the point should be that you want to go out and give your best every single week. You want to be competitive. Like when we went up against Dublin in 2007, Shane, you're going to laugh at this. People laughing outside. I fully believe we could take them down the stretch. Fully believed it. And like after 40 minutes, the game was 9-6 and David pushed the linesman. If he gets sent off, we stay in that game right till the end. Dublin got 5 points in that game from the 71st minute to the 75th minute. But we had a specific strategic game plan to contain them, to make it difficult for them, for us to get long periods of possession to grow into the game. 58% possession we had in the first half that night. And there was 1 score in it at half time. You know, you've got to, Shane, people, I listen to these idiots on Twitter and social media talking about, oh, there's no point in parking the bus in defensive football, etc., etc. But to win the game, Shane, you need to stay in the game. You need to be in the game. If you go out in 10 minutes like Westmeath done and just throw the down and just go out and you're 5 or 8, 9 points down, the game is over. But try and stay in the game and give yourself those chances, you know. And I think a lot of teams need to be starting to look at that, particularly when they go up against stronger sides.
Yeah, a huge blow for Meath is that James McEntee, he's likely to be out for the rest of the championship. But just to even just go at these games, Dublin obviously to win. Are you expecting Meath to come through as well? And by the way, do you think Laois should do that? Throw everyone behind the ball?
Well, listen, I think if Laois go in on Saturday night, is it Saturday night or Sunday? Is it Sunday?
That one is on Sunday, yeah.
It's on Sunday. So if Laois go into that game, Shane, you talked about the Croke Park factor. There's no team in this country that knows Croke Park inside out like Dublin. You know, every inch of it. And, you know, the width that they'll get in their game, the runners that they'll have, you know, the intensity they'll bring, the press that they'll put on the kick out. I just feel that if Laois go in with any other way of playing than being cautious and trying to stay in the game, they'll be blown out of the water in 15 minutes, and it honestly could end up anything. It could end up anything.